Now, the best value pitch process is an overlay on any type of delivery system, meaning it can be used with design bid build, CM at risk, and even the integrated project delivery methods. The pitch process has three main phases. The first would be selection. And of course, this is where we evaluate all the vendors, their bid offerings, and select that one best value that gives the highest level of expertise with the lowest cost. Now, to do this, we will look for 5 major criteria. The first being project capability. Or in other words, we want the vendors to differentiate themselves in terms of their level of expertise. We will want this by having them submit it in terms of claims and verifiable performance metrics. We want them to tell us what their level of expertise is, and we want them to back it up using verifiable performance metrics that they've collected from their past experience. The second criteria would be the risk assessment plan. We want to be able to know that the vendor can look into this project from beginning to end and identify the risks that could occur and know how to mitigate them before they happen. And of course, the kicker here is that we actually want them to give us verifiable performance metrics on how many times they've done it before and how successful they've been at actually implementing that risk mitigation plan. The third criteria would be the value-added options. We want the vendors using their expertise to look at the scope the client has presented and to give us options to change that scope, to increase the value of that project. Now, these are just options, and it could increase the cost or it could decrease the cost, but we want to know from the vendor's expertise what is in the best interest of the client in terms of adjusting the scope of work for this project. The fourth criteria, of course, would be price. These 4 criteria will be submitted with the bid proposal. In the selection process, of course, you will have the option of shortlisting the vendors, and the shortlisted vendors then will come in for an interview. This will be the 5th criteria that we will evaluate on. We will want the vendors to send in their actual people who will be doing work on this project. And we will ask these people their vision of the project in terms of their level of expertise, the risks that they foresee on this project, outlining the entire project from beginning to end, showing us in major steps what will happen, as well as backing all of that up with verifiable performance metrics on exactly how they know their plan will work. At the end of this, we will, of course, weight each criteria, prioritize all the vendors based on their scoring, and we will take only the best value vendor into phase 2. Phase 2 would be clarification. In this phase, we are only looking at one vendor or the main vendors that we will award a contract to. But before we award the contract to them, we will want to make sure that they know exactly what to do and how they're going to do it before they get a contract. Hence, in the clarification, 3 things will happen. 1, like the title says, we will have the expert vendor clarify their plan in detail. They will have to be able to relay that plan to the buyer so that the buyer can understand it and feel comfortable with it. And the very last thing in the clarification will be to award the vendor with the contract. Now, if the vendor cannot simply relay their plan and have the client feel comfortable with it, then they will not be awarded the contract, and we will kick them out and go to the next prioritized vendor. Meaning, in order for any contractor to receive a contract, they must actually prove to the client that they can do the work and that they have a plan and that they know exactly what steps to take. So what is a plan? A plan consists of 5 major categories. The first is scope of work. The vendor must be able to identify what is in the scope of work and what is out of it as well. This is so everyone is in agreement with what will happen. The second is a schedule. They must be able to split the schedule out into a milestone schedule with major activities as well as a detailed schedule, so the client knows the vendor has an actual account of every activity that will happen and when it will happen on the project. The third will be cost. They will have to be able to justify their cost, outline where the cost is going, and show and make the client comfortable with how the cost will be managed on this project. The fourth will be performance metrics. We'll want the vendor to identify metrics in which, throughout the entire course of this project, the client can know exactly what the vendor is doing, how well they're doing, and to be able to predict what will happen at the end of the project before it happens. And of course, the fifth will be bringing that risk assessment plan into a risk mitigation plan now, to outline all of the risks, how they will minimize them, and all the action items to ensure that the client has a very successful project. Once the vendor actually creates this plan and the client buys off on it, the contractor will be awarded, and we will hit or go into the execution phase. In the execution phase, the main thing that will occur will be the weekly risk report. Every week that this project and the service is being delivered, the contractor will need to turn in a weekly risk report. The weekly risk report simply has all of the baseline plan in terms of cost, time, and quality, or their performance metrics, documented in it. Then every week they will measure deviation to that plan. So the client knows every week exactly what the cost is, what the estimated delivery time will be, as well as what is the performance metrics and how well the project is going. Throughout the entire project, the contractor will update this report and turn it into the client. And then, of course, at the end of the project, the client will then evaluate the vendor on exactly how well they did and how satisfied they are with the deliverable and with the project. In this way, as clients begin to implement this best value approach, they will eventually have a continual documentation of the performance on all of their projects. To review, the three phases are selection, clarification, and execution. And that makes up the best value PIPs process.